The opening, a neighborhood battle like no other. Imagine this. You've just settled into your dream home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The lawns are well-maintained, the houses are pristine, and the peace of a friendly community wraps around you like a cozy blanket. The kind of place where neighbors wave as they pass, and you can leave your doors unlocked without a second thought. That was exactly how I felt when I moved into Oak Ridge Estates. It seemed like the perfect place. The home I purchased was perfect for my needs. A remote work setup in a converted garage with large windows. There was even space for 2 cars. The quiet streets, the well-kept parks, and the feeling of a neighborhood where everyone respected one another's space. Life was good. But as many people eventually learn, perfection is often just the calm before the storm. Enter Patricia Henderson, or as she preferred to be called, Pat. It wasn't long before my peaceful existence was disrupted, all because of a single person's obsession with control. The more I tried to maintain the peace, the more it felt like I was living in a real-life episode of a neighborhood feud, a story where personal boundaries were repeatedly violated under the guise of community rules. The trouble started small. Complaint here, a reminder there. But these weren't your average neighborly grievances. Oh no, Patricia had a way of making the most trivial issues seem like dire threats to the neighborhood's very survival. And I, the new guy on the block, had become her primary target. From my mailbox to my trash bins, nothing was safe from Patricia's scrutiny. The worst part? It wasn't just the constant stream of complaints. It was the entitlement that oozed from every interaction. I'm sure we've all encountered people like Patricia in one form or another, the type who believes that their problems are your problems, and their needs are your responsibilities. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. One rainy Tuesday morning, I found myself in the middle of an important video call when the sound of a car horn pierced through my concentration. 5 minutes of blaring honking from outside my house. At first, I tried to ignore it, but as the minutes passed, I couldn't help but wonder, who could possibly be so inconsiderate? That's when I saw her. There she was, Patricia, sitting in her shiny white Lexus, parked right under my carport, pressing the horn. Her face was twisted in annoyance, as if I had personally wronged her. At that moment, my frustration reached its peak. I had no idea what was coming next. Nor did I know that this moment would mark the start of an escalating series of events that would lead to a full-on neighborhood showdown. Patricia had made her demands clear. She wanted to use my property, and it was only the beginning. What followed was nothing short of a relentless game of one-upmanship. A series of invasions, manipulations, and ultimatums that forced me to confront a new reality. That peace and quiet in a neighborhood could be just as fragile as the relationships between its residents. In the end, it wasn't just about parking spaces or garage codes. It was about respect, boundaries, and the struggle to reclaim my privacy from someone who believed they could take whatever they wanted without asking. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. I never thought that a simple act of parking in my garage would lead to a full-blown feud that would test my patience, my boundaries, and my resolve. And that's where the real story begins. The escalation, a battle of wills. The initial encounter with Patricia was only the beginning, a mere prelude to the full scale of the conflict that was about to unfold. To understand the depth of what was happening, you have to look beyond the surface. This wasn't just about a parking space or a misplaced garden decoration, or even a misunderstanding about trash bins. No, this was a fight for control, for respect, and ultimately for privacy. And the longer this conflict dragged on, the more I realized that Patricia's actions weren't random. They were part of a pattern of entitlement, manipulation, and sheer disregard for the boundaries of others. A small beginning with big consequences. At first, Patricia's behavior seemed minor. A few complaints about my small collection of succulents on the front porch. "They're not approved vegetation," she had claimed in that sweetly insistent tone she always used. I had moved them, of course. What was the harm? I didn't want to make waves in my new neighborhood. Then came another complaint, this time about the trash bins being visible for too long after collection. A slight irritation, but again I complied. After all, I was trying to fit in and follow the rules. It wasn't the end of the world, right? But Patricia wasn't satisfied with just a few minor inconveniences. Each time I thought things were behind us, something else came up. The color of my mailbox. The bird feeder in my backyard. Packages left on the porch while I was busy with work calls. Each seemingly trivial issue became a matter of great importance to her, and each time, I found myself complying, adjusting my routine, and wondering if I had somehow missed a deeper issue. But the truth was becoming clearer with each passing day. Patricia wasn't interested in peace. She was interested in control. And I was becoming her target. The carport incident, the tipping point. The situation took a dramatic turn one rainy Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of an important video call with clients, discussing software updates and project timelines, when I heard it, the incessant honking of a car horn. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. When I finally stepped outside, umbrella in hand, I was greeted by the sight of Patricia sitting in her pristine white Lexus, parked under my carport. Repeatedly pressing the horn, her gaze locked on me through the windshield as if I had done something wrong. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. I couldn't understand what was going on. I had parked my car in the garage that morning, leaving the carport empty, but that didn't give anyone permission to park there, especially not without asking. "Marcus, you need to move your car," Patricia called out, her voice dripping with passive-aggressive sweetness. "I've been sitting out here getting wet." I blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" "The street is flooded near my driveway," she explained as though it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "I didn't want to risk water damage to my car, and your carport was empty, so I thought it would be fine to park here temporarily." I could feel the blood rising to my face. "That's my carport. I'm in the middle of an important work call, and this is my property. You can't just park here without asking." Her response was a roll of her eyes, followed by an exaggerated sigh. "I'm asking now," she said, her tone dripping with mock patience. "Just move your car out of the garage, and I'll pull in there instead." I was speechless. Not only had she parked on my property without permission, but now she was demanding that I move my car so that she could park in my garage. I took a deep breath, my patience wearing thin. "No, I'm not moving my car. This is my property, and you need to leave." She glared at me for a solid 30 seconds before finally backing out, but her parting words were a thinly veiled threat. "I'll be speaking to the board about this. There should be emergency provisions for situations like this." That night, I received an email from the HOA, titled Proposed Amendment for Community Emergency Vehicle Accommodations, suggesting that residents with excess parking space be required to make it available to neighbors during emergencies, like bad weather. The email was clear. Patricia was behind this proposal. I didn't need to be a legal expert to know this was going too far. I immediately forwarded the email to a lawyer friend who confirmed what I suspected. The HOA couldn't force me to allow others to park on my property. In fact, I had every right to refuse. With that confirmation, I drafted a firm response to the board, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. The unthinkable, Patricia takes it a step further. A week later, I came home from a grocery run to find something that left me in complete disbelief. Patricia's white Lexus was parked in my garage. My actual garage, not the carport. The garage door was wide open, and her car was sitting there as though it was the most normal thing in the world. There was no note, no explanation, nothing. Just her car, parked as though I had somehow agreed to it. I stood there, staring at the scene, trying to process what I was seeing. How had she even gotten the garage door open? Then it hit me. During a previous HOA inspection, Patricia had asked for access to check some wiring on the outside of the house. I had reluctantly given her the code to the exterior keypad, never imagining she would abuse it like this. The note she left behind made it all worse. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an acknowledgement of any wrongdoing. It was just a casual note. "Marcus, had to attend an emergency board meeting. My driveway is being resealed today, and I couldn't park on the street. Used your garage since you were out. Thanks for understanding, Pat." I was furious. Not only had Patricia used my garage without permission, but she had done so with a sense of entitlement that was both infuriating and shocking. I immediately closed the garage door, went inside, and changed the code. But I wasn't done. I needed to send a clear message that this kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. I sent Patricia a simple text. I see you've parked in my garage without permission. The code has been changed. Please contact me when you return so we can discuss this breach of privacy. That was when things really started to escalate. The tension builds, a lesson in boundaries. Patricia's response to my message was exactly what I expected. Entitlement masked by feigned ignorance. When she arrived hours later, demanding that I open the garage door, I refused. This wasn't just about a parking space anymore, it was about boundaries. You can't just take my property whenever you want, I told her. You entered my property without permission, used my garage without consent, and you're not just going to waltz in here whenever it suits you. Her reaction was, unsurprisingly, a display of righteous indignation. She even threatened to call the police on me, claiming that I was holding her car hostage. But I wasn't the one who had crossed the line. It was her. At this point, I was done being passive. I had already changed the code, and I was prepared to stand my ground. In the following days, I made sure to document everything. Every interaction, every note, every text, every action. I knew that this wasn't just about protecting my property. It was about standing up for my right to live in peace without someone constantly trying to impose their will on me. The HOA had become her weapon, and I was determined to show her that I wouldn't be intimidated. What started as a simple dispute over parking had now become a full-blown battle of wills. A battle that would test my resolve and push me to take drastic measures to protect my boundaries. Standing firm and the power of boundaries. As the days wore on, the situation between Patricia and me became a full-blown battle. What started with a simple parking dispute had escalated to something much bigger. An attack on my privacy, my personal space, and my sense of peace. Yet, amid all this chaos, something profound began to take shape. A powerful lesson about the importance of boundaries, respect, and standing firm in the face of entitlement. And as the conflict played out, I began to realize that sometimes, maintaining your dignity means taking a hard stance, regardless of who you're up against. The breaking point, Patricia's behavior had crossed so many lines that I lost count. But the straw that truly broke the camel's back was when she parked in my garage again, this time without even leaving a note. She assumed, once more, that my property was hers to use at her convenience. It was as if all of her previous actions had taught her nothing. In that moment, I knew I could no longer just let it go, or try to brush things under the rug. I had already changed the code on the garage door, but this time, I took additional precautions. I installed a heavy-duty padlock on the inside of the door, one that would prevent the garage from being opened from the outside, no matter how many times Patricia tried to enter. It wasn't just about locking up my property. It was about locking up the possibility of further invasions into my life. I didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily, but I also wasn't going to be passive anymore. The padlock was a statement. It was a signal that my space, my privacy, was not negotiable. I wasn't going to let anyone waltz into my life, uninvited and unaccountable. I had to set a precedent, and it was high time that Patricia learned this lesson. The face-off, confrontation, and clarity. Of course, Patricia didn't let it slide. Not even a little. The next day, she came back, expecting to park in the garage once again, just like before. But this time, the padlock was in place. She tried the code. Nothing. Then she tried it again. Still nothing. Her confusion was palpable. She rang my doorbell in a panic, and when I opened the door, I was greeted with her now familiar look of entitlement and anger. "This is outrageous," she yelled. "You locked my car inside your garage. That's illegal." I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Your car? In my garage? Without my permission? You don't get to make those decisions, Patricia." It wasn't just about the garage anymore. It was about everything she had done to me over the past few weeks. She had crossed boundaries again and again, and now there were consequences. "I secured my own property," I explained calmly, maintaining my composure. "After repeated invasions of privacy, I thought it was necessary. The only person acting illegally here is you, Patricia." But Patricia wasn't one to back down easily. She immediately threatened to call the police, but I was ready for that, too. Feel free to call them, I said with a shrug. I have all the evidence I need. I have security footage, documentation, and I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about your behavior. The conversation ended in a stalemate. She didn't have much to say after that. Her anger and frustration were clear, but she knew she was in the wrong. I had drawn a line in the sand, and Patricia wasn't sure how to cross it. That morning, as I watched her storm off down the street, I knew that I had won. But the story wasn't quite over. There was one more chapter to unfold, the HOA. The HOA and the final showdown. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail from the HOA. The contents were predictably vindictive. They had issued a notice accusing me of having an illegal home office conversion, something that had been approved when I purchased the property years ago. This wasn't just an ordinary HOA complaint. No, this felt personal. It felt like a retaliation for everything I had done to stand my ground against Patricia. I was furious, but I wasn't going to back down. I reached out to my lawyer, who confirmed that the HOA had no grounds to force me to revert my home office back into a garage. The previous owners had obtained all the proper permits, and nothing had changed in the 3 years since. This wasn't about the law, it was about power. Patricia had used her position on the board to retaliate against me for not bowing to her will. But the gloves were off. I wasn't going to let her or the HOA dictate how I lived my life. I prepared a detailed legal response, citing all the proper documentation and procedures that had been followed when I purchased my home. I made it clear that I would not be intimidated. The HOA didn't have a leg to stand on, and Patricia's petty power play was only going to make things worse for her. Then the unthinkable happened. As I returned home one afternoon, I saw Patricia's Lexus parked in my driveway once again, this time blocking the garage completely. It was as if she was daring me to do something about it. And I did. I took photos of the violation, called the non-emergency police line, and had a towing company on standby. This wasn't just a parking issue, it was a deliberate act of harassment. When the officer arrived, he spoke with Patricia, who tried to spin the situation into something it wasn't. But the evidence was clear. Patricia had been warned. She had no right to park on my property, and her continued actions were only escalating the situation. That was when the full weight of her actions finally hit her. The HOA had been notified. The police had been involved. The community was beginning to see through her manipulation. And in the end, she was forced to leave the board, and with her went her stranglehold on the neighborhood. The end of an era, lessons learned. 3 weeks later, Patricia's house was listed for sale. I didn't celebrate her departure. In fact, I felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't about winning. It was about preserving my peace, my privacy, and my rights as a homeowner. The HOA, now led by a more reasonable and collaborative president, began to focus on what really mattered: building a respectful community, not harassing neighbors for trivial reasons. As for me, I left the padlock on my garage door, but I didn't need to use it anymore. The lesson had been learned, and the neighborhood was better for it. Sometimes standing your ground is the most powerful thing you can do. Sometimes it's about holding on to your dignity, your boundaries, and your peace even when others try to take them from you. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor who's crossed boundaries or taken advantage of your kindness, you know how frustrating it can be. But as we've seen in this story, standing up for yourself and setting clear boundaries can make all the difference. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with friends who might find it just as relatable. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Let us know in the comments what's the most outrageous thing a neighbor has ever done to you. We'd love to hear your experiences. Thanks for watching, and remember, respect your neighbors, but never forget to respect yourself first.